You know, it helps that you actually do your own podcast and you have like legit mic and everything, right?
Yeah. I have a recording studio at home too for music, so I'm somewhat of an audiophile.
Oh, nice. I love
this
that.
is my like low end thing, the Shure podcast mic. I have like Neumann mics and crazy stuff.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Shots fired. The Shure is your low end mic?
Yeah.
Man, what's the high end mic?
I have a Neumann U47 and a Neumann U67, which is what the Beatles used to record. They're just like some of the best mics in the world. That's for recording music and stuff.
Yeah, I gotta up my game.
I don't think you need it for a Shure is great for podcast. You know.
Awesome. Well,
you can't replace part of the brain. Like,
you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high. A lot of things.
State of medtech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Got a really exciting guest for you today. Somebody that I've known about since I came into the industry over 12 years ago, and that's Rony Abovitz. Rony was the one of the co-founders of MAKO Surgical, but then from MAKO, he went on and made another company that all of us knew about, which was called Magic Leap. And Magic Leap was a pioneer in augmented reality. I remember, the first time that I saw augmented reality, like I think over 10 years ago, I just remember this image of like a huge whale jumping out of an ocean and falling down, but it was like inside of a gym. And I just remember like thinking like, what a time to be alive. So Rony, it's so good to finally have you on the show. It took like 10 years in the making, but like here we are. Great to meet you.
Great meeting you, Omar, and thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Maybe I think what would be really interesting to start out with is to, like I've only mentioned two of the companies that you founded, and so you're definitely a technologist. But before we talk about all that, I'm really curious, like, who are you? Like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Like, what were you doing before all of this?
That's a great question. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, which is like the Siberia of America. But no, it was good growing up in Cleveland.
It is the Siberia of America. I've been there
cold.
Once.
I'm a forever Browns fan, and they're like sort of perennial, like will they ever win a Super Bowl? But grew up in Ohio and in Cleveland, and my family really loved coming to Florida. And we would come like once a year for vacation. And then in middle school, my dad and my uncle. My dad was in real estate development, and my uncle was an architect, and they both decided Florida was going to be the future. And we all migrated south, like myself, cousins, and parents, like a whole southward migration in middle school. Everyone came down, and what we knew of Florida was like Everglades and ocean and alligators, and it was pretty crazy.
That's amazing. And yeah, it's funny when you mentioned that Cleveland is like the Siberia of America. I was reading about Cleveland lately because Rockefeller got his start there, and there's that famous Cleveland massacre where he essentially acquired like out of the 26 rival like refineries in Cleveland, he acquired like 24 in 4 months, which is just insane.
Well, it was good growing up there because as a kid, I remember like I could grab my sled and we'd all just run around and, till like late at night, and the doors were open and all the kids in the neighborhood would play football, snowball fights, go sledding. And it was just sort of a very safe thing. Like I walked myself to school at the age of 4 or 5. And then it was just like very interesting. I don't think I didn't let my daughter grow up that way. I don't think you would do that anymore. But it was just kind of, we lived in a suburb. The city itself was sketchy at the time. The lake was really polluted. It was famously burning. Lake Erie was on fire around when we left. And it was just one of those like dilapidated industrial towns. And today, if you go visit Cleveland, it's incredible. There's been a whole renaissance of downtown, the Cleveland Clinic. But it was an interesting kind of thing. And probably another bit of trivia, my mom was a student at Case Western with me probably a month or two old inside her. And she was an art student at Kent State University when the National Guard shooting happened. The famous shooting at Kent State. She was running around campus and heard the shots and saw everything and went to hide in a building. So I was kind of there at that event, but I was not conscious yet.
Oh, wow. That's like really scary. And yeah, I think that there's that iconic photo of the girl who's like crouching over like one of the students who got shot. That's what I think. When I think of Kent State, I think of that photo. It's just like really intense.
And then, it's interesting when we were doing MAKO, one of the things I did was I set up a facility in Cleveland. So I had kind of this hometown return, and we had a factory in Florida right near my high school in Davie, Florida. So I went to Nova High School, and the factory for MAKO was set up about a mile away from my high school, Nova High School Public, which was really interesting. And then we set up, I think it was maybe 5,000 or 6,000 square foot facility in Cleveland near the Cleveland Clinic. And that was partially because, I was partially Cleveland. And when we were building up the IP for MAKO, we had a relationship with the Cleveland Clinic, which is a whole story of how the whole thing got built. But it was kind of cool to return to Ohio, have a site there. Our chief software architect, a guy named Lou Arata, couldn't move for family reasons. So I said, we're just going to build a facility around you. And he would come down like a week or two a month, and he built up a team up there. So we had the main one in Florida, and we had the second site in Cleveland, not far from the clinic, and it turned out well.
That's amazing. Before we get more into the details of some of the tech companies you founded, I want to ask you about this because you did a master's over at Miami, and what I thought was very interesting. I have this belief that some of the best and great founders, they have like a really interesting talent stack, right? So granted, yes, you're a technologist, you're an engineer, but at the same time, you are on the track and field team, you're a cartoonist, and this is a first for the show. You are the first guest to share this one interesting factoid with me, which is we were both DJs. So I was a DJ for my local high school, and you were the DJ for WVM over at Miami, which is amazing. So
Yeah.
So did you always have, sort of this interest in sort of broad interest in things?
Yeah, I've been oddly left brain, right brain, probably because of my parents. But I was a cartoonist. I wanted to be an astronaut, pilot, aerospace engineer, and also wanted to be a musician. I wanted to do too many things, make animated films. So in school, I was the cartoonist for the University of Miami paper. I was DJ for WVUM. I was in a band. I was a track and field thrower. I threw the javelin because I tried to walk on to football and try to walk on to baseball. And the coach was like, there's just no way. They were some of the greatest teams in the history of sports at the time. And the coach is like, you could be a tackling dummy on the football team, or you could not play at all for the baseball team. So I was a bit disenchanted. And I walked over the track and field and said, what about javelin? And my first year, the coach was like, there's no way you're going to make it. And said, don't come back. But I trained all year, came back as a sophomore, made it as a redshirt freshman to the varsity team. And it was funny because we got to train, and the football players. That's not easy,
by the way.
That was really hard. I trained 8 hours a day.
D1 athlete, and especially not just at any D1 school, at University of Miami of all places.
And we had Olympic athletes on our team, sprinters, runners, the football players who were winning championships who were also on our travel team. So they're like, how did you make it? So part of it, I was raising the GPA. I scored a couple points on our away meets. I was like, if the curve looks like this, I was on the downside of the curve, barely hanging on. But for me, it was just making the cut and being able to be on a D1 varsity track and field team was all that I needed. I just didn't want to come in last. And if I could put a couple points on once in a while, that was I was like Rudy, making the team, because I was an honors student in engineering. So I was a hero to all the nerdy kids in engineering. You're on the track team. How did you do that? It's pretty insane.
That's amazing.
Not that I was fast, I could throw. So I was a thrower.
I mean, I don't know. I think that's an amazing thing to have.
And you know what the interesting karma was? That. We had the quarterbacks come by, and they're like, "Oh, you guys can't throw." So we had a throw off between the javelin throwers and the quarterbacks. That's a totally different motion. Yeah. So we all beat the quarterbacks, and that was kind of an amazing moment. It was like, yes, I'm not going to ever play football for UM, but in our throw off, we all beat the quarterbacks. And once in a while, we'd play touch football with them. Touch meaning you get tackled without pads. But that was some of the most fun I ever had. Being an engineering student, but I'm playing pickup, touch football with the Division I championship team. That was absolutely incredible.
That's amazing. Being again DJing cartoons, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just I'm curious.
It's all fun.
That's what's up?
Oh, it's all fun stuff. It's all awesome.
Well, as a cartoonist, back in the late 90s, were there any other cartoonists that you kind of looked up to and really admired a lot?
I was obsessed with I don't know if you remember the strip called Bloom County.
Bloom County. I
If you
think
Google
I know.
anyone who hasn't, there's a great collection. Bloom County it had like Opus and Bill the Cat, and I think the
Oh
guy was
yeah. Oh man, this
he
is a
was great.
throwback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bit of a throw. Bloom County was amazing, and Calvin and Hobbes. I love
Calvin
Calvin and
Hobbes
Hobbes.
is
I love
great.
Bloom County. And my one of my roommates was also an amazing artist. He won like an award from Lucasfilm. He was a much better artist than I was, and he would sometimes scribble on my comics. You know, I almost got expelled for one of my cartoons.
Really? We got to hear that story.
I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, and maybe I have. I'm not sure.
This is the first time for everything. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. So I think this was very sophomore. I think it was sophomore year. So it's very sophomoric, and it was late at night, and I had to do a strip every single week, twice a week. I think it was the Monday and Thursday edition. So I'm like trying to figure out what to do, and my roommate's like, let me do something here. So I kind of did this like really dumb cartoon. He's like, let me fill in the background. And back then we would do a strip on a big piece of like Bristol board. We'd take it to the Miami Herald, and they would shrink it down. So the strip would fit, it'd be shrunk maybe 4 or 5 times smaller. So if you drew something big, you couldn't quite see what it all was. And then if you'd shrink, imagine like lines would come together. So he drew this very interesting background that we thought would not show up. And the background had a lot of, let's say, sophomoric things that represented maybe the Kama Sutra and other rated R and beyond kind of activities that college students might be enamored with. But it was all like in the trees in the background of the strip. Well, anyway, after it shrunk and the Herald printed it, because they were the printer for the University of Miami Hurricane, it was like gleamingly perfect, like high resolution, and everything popped more than we thought. It wasn't like we were basically trying to pay homage to the Disney animators who would hide little weird things in the background. There's all the legends, right. like in there would be something kind of slightly crude or whatever in the background images on one frame or something. So our thing went too well, and all the lines joined, and all this stuff was just very there. And the campus was sort of erupting, and I'm just getting high-fived by every student. I'm going to class. I'm like on top of things. And then I get pulled out of class, and it's like, the Herald is shutting down the paper. The editors are freaking out, and the principal says the president of the school says you're being expelled, and you're losing your scholarship. And I'm like, oh, this is like the worst day in the world. Like I'm basically not a student, losing my scholarship, getting kicked off the team. It was horrible. So for like a day or two, I think I was in limbo. I don't know if my parents knew about what was going on yet. But then the professors at the university, a lot of the journalism and other professors, and I think the editors of the paper all went on this like free speech thing trying to redeem me. And eventually they won. And I was on probation. I couldn't do comics for a couple months. I was reinstated. I got my scholarship back. I had to write something. I promised to never do this again. And I think a couple months later, I was doing cartoons again. So I think I did get away with my sophomoric. If anyone has ever seen that, it's in the archives of UM. You can see it. I'm not going to go into details. It was sort of Animal House-ish. Today it's probably like very mild. People are like, oh my God, what was the big deal? But back then it was pretty intense, especially for the Herald. They're like, we don't ever print this. So I might be the first person to ever have the Herald because it all shrunk in. Again, very highly sophomoric. Apologies to anyone who was offended by it, but it was pretty funny.
Quick commercial break for marketing leaders and sales leaders. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth reiterating that the time clinicians have to meet with medical reps is limited. You know this and feel this. It's been a challenge for med device sellers for decades. Now, with the rising workloads and patient care demands, clinicians' times are shrinking even more. And the window for your sellers and your sales team to meet with these clinicians consists of pretty much just minutes in a busy hospital hallway. The reality is your sellers have to make every second count or someone else will. They must be concise, they got to be efficient, and use highly relevant information to make the most out of these brief interactions. ShowPad is all about focusing your sellers on the art of selling, which is about building trust and relationships. And while there's science, the ShowPad solution handles the behind-the-scenes prep and follow-up work to make your team more effective. The best part is that you get insights on content and training performance so you can make strategic decisions and invest more in what works based on data. ShowPad helps your sales and marketing teams spend their time in more productive, high-impact ways with a multiplying effect on your revenue results and growing your pipeline. So to learn more, go to showpad.com/state of medtech. Now, let's get back to the show.
By the way, something interesting interesting factoid about the Herald is that thanks to them and then Mike Cernovich, they actually joined together to file. I'm not a legal guy, but like some kind of lawsuit that actually opened up the evidence files and got Jeffrey Epstein arrested.
Oh
So
my
Miami
God.
Herald, yeah. So a lot of people don't know that. So yeah,
That has nothing to do with the University of Miami cartooning. Nothing at all. Just
nothing to do.
just-
Nothing to do.
Just,
Nothing,
nothing to
just
do.
putting that out there. Just
Yeah,
making
it's
sure.
like, yep.
So, your first like big company was essentially, well, it started with Zcat, and then which converted over into MAKO. And I've had your former, I guess, co-founders and colleagues. So one was Maurice Ferré was on the show, and then also Chris Dewey. And actually I learned about Zcat first because I met Chris Dewey and he was talking about Zcat. I'm like, what the hell is Zcat? So can you talk to us, like, what was Zcat? How did it get started? And then what was that like to decide, hey, we're going to convert this over into a surgical robotics company?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of the history because I'm actually writing a book about MAKO to Magic Leap to SynthB. But
Oh, sweet. Well, as you
So-
can tell, I'm a big reader. So as soon as that's out, I'm one of the guys you got to send a copy to.
Awesome. We'll do one more. So I'll give you a little bit of history. So it started, the whole idea of like Zcat MAKO. It's kind of the same thing renamed, and I'll sort of explain why it got renamed. And then MAKO bought the assets of Zcat in reverse. It was sort of an interesting thing that happened. It started at my now wife's apartment at UM. So as a undergrad and in grad school, I was working as a engineer for a company called Lima, Lima, which is an Italian orthopedic surgery company in Italy. And I got to experience, while a student, being in surgery firsthand, watching trauma surgeries, all sorts of hip and knee procedures. And I was their lone engineer in America. So I had to learn how to adapt the Italian line and the sizing and all the things to American tastes while I'm still in school, before I'm even in grad school for biomedical engineering, and then I switch over to grad school, and just learning about that. And I decided that what I had seen was very like medieval. Orthopedic surgery was like saws and bone stuff, and just the way it was all done felt like 100-year-old carpentry exercise. And I'm like, we have to do things better. And my first thought was it's going to be robotics, like Star Wars or something. The medical droid from Star Wars. I'm like, this has to be something better we could do. And I decided I was going to start a company building surgical robots and computer-assisted surgery. I was going to basically build an operating system for medicine and have robots work with surgeons. So we built a kind of hacked-up robot while we were in school. We found an early surgeon in North Miami who basically let a friend of mine and I work in his back room. And we hacked up this first thing, and we partnered up with Michael Peshkin, who was a professor of the LIMS lab at Northwestern University, and one of his grad students named Julio. So we turned that effort into Zcat. The Z was Guido Zorzoli, who was the North American president of Lima at the time. And I said, if we can use your facility after hours to start this thing, I'll give you a percentage of the company. So he got a percentage of the company. And that way I said, I don't want to have any issues. So we signed the agreement with him, gave him a little bit of equity. And then we worked on this thing. And I was like living on like hundreds of dollars a month. That's it. Like bean and cheese burrito money, some of the cartooning money, and then paying for some of the stuff on student, the Visa credit cards you can get as a college student. We're paying for some things that way. I didn't even know you had to file a corporation until maybe a year into it. It was like really that naive and trying to figure things out. One of the breakthroughs was Mike Peshkin told me that at MIT, there's an AI lab, which I knew about. But in that AI lab, there's a robot called the whole arm manipulator. And the whole arm manipulator was developed in Rodney Brooks's AI lab at MIT with a guy named Ken Salisbury, who went on to do a lot of big things at Intuitive Surgical, and his grad student, Bill Townsend. And it was a cable-driven robot. And the theory was you could do haptics, force control with it, but no one had done it, not with that system. So I went to Boston, visited Bill, and said, I want to turn this thing into a surgeon. And this is like one of the real origins of what became MAKO. And the university and Bill were trying to convince me to just do a janitor, like just have it clean toilets. Like there's no way you could ever build a surgeon out of this robot. Like it's just impossible. How about just cleaning toilets? So I'm like, no, I want surgical rights. So like you're giving up the biggest market. So I'm like, just give me the rights for surgery And it turned out to be not that expensive. Although for us, broke college kids, I had to borrow money from like parents and relatives. And I think we scrounged up like 50K or something and licensed a couple patents for like 25K, and became an MIT official licensee on the whole arm manipulator. And at the time, it was sort of famous because it had thrown a pitch at a Boston Red Sox game. And it was very high speed and somewhat not stable. So the robot could do like these like super ninja moves and was incredibly fast, everything opposite of what you wanted in an operating room. And it was like the distance from what MAKO is today to that is like a million miles apart this time. But the idea was something that had no gears, was so force control possible. For some of the geeky guys, force control is like when you can actually push on something and get force feedback, like the robot operated like someone that has like limbs and ligaments and muscles, unlike gears. And it had this mode it can go into, or theoretically, that was like zero gravity. So the robot, we got one rough prototype that was totally not able to do what we needed to do. And I went recruiting for a head of robotics. So I went to Carnegie Mellon, and there was a guy named Arthur Quaid, who's still a good friend, and he was doing his PhD in Ralph Hollis's lab. So Arthur Quaid was like this kind of robot genius doing his post-grad work, probably never wanting to leave Carnegie Mellon. It was just a great opportunity. I said, why don't you leave school and come join our broke-ass startup down in Florida, leave Pittsburgh. And somehow he did. And he is one of the Jedis. There's like 5-6 people that really made everything at MAKO possible. Arthur is like, he's one of the heroes of the story. Like, no Arthur, there's nothing works. So he looks at this thing, like, everything about this is not right, but I think I could figure out a way to make it accurate and make haptics work. It was just kind of like a true robot genius. And then we basically brought him down and we rented this little place in Hollywood, Florida, this broken down pencil factory building that was like probably from the 1930s. And the ceiling was falling and it was musty smelling and the AC barely worked. And that's where we started building a robot that became the MAKO robot. So ZCAT basically built all the tech and made all the tech possible that became the thing. And I got to tell you how we got introduced to Chris. Because that was like real fate. There's multiple fated things that you have to hear, which are just crazy divine intervention moments.
That's exactly why, one of the reasons why I want to have you on, because like with Chris, you know, everybody knows him today as like this investor in medtech, but the guy came out of the movie industry. He was the co-founder of Candid Films. And like, you know, our episode, like when I first interviewed, I had no idea what to expect. I figured we'd be talking about, you know, some of like the more technical aspects of investment, but, you know, we focused a lot on this idea that he loves, which is like, how do you raise money around an idea? You know, so how did you and Chris Dewey meet?
So let me tell you like the serendipity, right? So I've got Arthur, I've got the Wham robot, which cannot really do anything, but it's the basis of something we're going to turn into something else. It had really unique properties. And one more thing for your listeners and for you about this thing. It was inspired by Da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci had sketches of a knight that was built out of cables that the theory was that you could program the knight, he'd walk around. No gears, it was a cable-driven robot. This idea at MIT was inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. That inspired 2 different robot systems, which are cousins and actually have interrelationships. The Da Vinci robot from Intuitive and the MAKO Surgical Rio. They both come from Leonardo da Vinci's idea, and some of the founders of Intuitive funded us.
I'm going to pull this up real quick because I found this online. So this is Da Vinci's mechanical knight.
Yes, and
I had no idea.
You see the cable-driven architecture that inspired Bill Townsend, that inspired Ken Salisbury to revisit a new way to drive robotics that had not been done since Da Vinci's time. And its cables couldn't be done. It was unstable. It was uncontrollable. All these issues. Everything was gears. But they went to this other thing, and the proof of concept was the whole arm manipulator, which they said it would be much more human-like. And to me, that was very exciting. Like something that could be very human and gentle. Our first logo for ZCAT was a butterfly. The idea that it could be so gentle, like it could just touch your nose and not hurt you. Because at the time, you could not be near a robot. Or they had to be in cages. So we're going to bring a robot to be near people, near an open incision. Cutting in someone was like, that's the last thing the FDA ever wanted to hear. It's the last thing investors thought was possible. It was like, there were rules, like OSHA rules. You could not be in the same vicinity as a robot. It had to be in a cage, separate, so it wouldn't hurt you. So we kind of created this whole new category. And I think this was why we worked with Mike Peshkin at Northwestern, He was working on the idea of collaborative robotics, and we were one of the first in the world to do this, which now became a term called cobots. Collaborative robotics, robots meant to work around people, and we thought this Da Vinci-inspired cable-driven architecture could be that. That was the promise that got really brilliant people like Arthur to join us, that we were going to create not only a company, but a whole new field of robotics, which is now cobots, collaborative robotics is a thing. And we are one of the first in the world to do it, if not the first.
That's amazing. And so how did the Chris Dewey,
So we're tootling along with like myself, my wife. I think we had some like part-time students. Arthur. There's not a lot going on except for just a handful of us hacking away with like very, very tiny salaries and like This is like real garage eating like ramen, eating burritos from Taco Bell for like 29 cent kind of mode. I get a call out of the blue from a gentleman named Chris Dewey, who had a dream after the new year that he was going to create a thing called Robot Ventures. He was teaming up with Rodney Brooks, who founded iRobot. Rodney Brooks, the same guy that was running the AI lab at MIT. And we were not long before that, had licensed this thing to do surgery. So when Chris asked him, what are you excited about? He said, Intuitive Surgical, iRobot, and this little company called Zcan in Florida. And they funded all three. All three became like winners in robotics. So Chris has the Midas touch. So they flew down with Rodney, saw our grungy little place, said, I'll put some money into the company. Let's make this happen. I believe in what you're doing. And I love the fact that he was a filmmaker and slightly crazy. And we shared like the whole creative technical thing. And he had all these amazing stories. And he said, I'm going to help you build this company. And here's the real hero part of Chris. We were doing very well after they came in. Like we're starting to build up. And I think I brought the team to maybe 16, 17 people. And on September 10th, 2001, I get a call from a venture group called Pequot. So I met Pequot originally because they wanted to merge my company and Maurice's company together and thought they'd build a powerhouse by combining VTI and what we were building at Zcat, robotics, computer surgery, orthopedics, and he was doing magnetic tracking and ENT. They thought this would be the dominant player. And ultimately, I met Maurice at Pequot's headquarters before 9/11, talking about all this. That's how I met him for the first time. So Pequot wanted to put us together. This was Pequot Capital in Lower Manhattan, which is really, really kind of an exciting moment. And then he gets this offer from GE and he's like, sorry, I'm not doing that. I'm selling my company to GE. So exit Maurice for a couple more years. So now we're back to like the story of how we became MAKO. Pequot says, we still love you and we want to fund this thing. September 10th, 2001, I get a call from them that they're approving a term sheet for our company. And I'm going to get the team together 9/11 in the morning in our office. We all got there around 8 in the morning or 7:30 early, awaiting the call because the partner meeting was first thing in the morning. They were going to call you, let you know the term sheet's approved, and we're super excited. So I get the whole team, and our conference room was really shabby. We had like a conference table we found like in a junkyard with broken chairs, and we had like a little television in the background on the news. Someone was watching while we're waiting the call. And I think around 8:45, 8:50, 9 a.m. when the first plane hits, we're sort of watching this, wondering, holy cow, like a plane accidentally took down one of the towers or hit one of the towers. And about an hour later, it was obvious that like something much worse was going on and the world was kind of ending. And that could have been the end of the story. So our team was going nuts. The whole world was going nuts. I don't know where our listeners were at that time, but like it was a really, really horrible moment. It was like a Pearl Harbor moment. And I remember exactly where I was. And I told the team, you need to go home, make sure your family's okay, get what you need. Some of us thought it was like the movie Red Dawn, of people going to come out of the sky. It was just like really insane what was happening. So I said, let's regroup tomorrow. Came back tomorrow. And I told the team, like, obviously we've lost our funding. We have maybe a month left. Things look really dire. If you want to quit, you can quit. A couple of people left. I think 15 stayed. I said, if you stay, I'm committed to not letting this thing go down and I will figure it out. And Chris was the only guy who called me back like the day after. He's like, don't worry, we'll figure something out. And that don't worry was he'll pay the bills and keep the lights on. No one take a salary. We gave everyone extra equity. I think 15 or 16 people worked for 2 or 3 months, no salary, no hope of funding. Right after 9/11, keeping the dream of MAKO alive. That's like the hero group that made this all possible. And they made all these amazing advancements. So I took a junky prototype. I took Arthur. We took one guy on our team who was like sort of commercial BD, myself in a van. I think it was a gray van. And we said, we're going to drive around the country and not come back till we get funded. My wife's like, no, you need to come back because we just had a baby. But I'm like, I'm going to get this thing funded. So there's this epic road trip right after 9/11 where Chris was calling everyone in the Midwest and the Northeast, anyone that was willing to take a call. And he says, I got this amazing thing. I know the world just ended, but you have to meet these guys. So he's sending us like all over the country, and we're just driving day and night like a band in a van. And this was the crazy, like, make the company happen moment where we're driving around and going like, you know, to Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky and all over the place, upstate New York, all over New England. He finally calls me and says, I have a break. There's a guy in Princeton, New Jersey, Sycamore Ventures, John Whitman. His wife, John's wife, is the governor of New Jersey. He's agreed to meet you. And I'm like, he's like, where are you guys? I'm like, we're like 8 hours away, 9 hours away. He says, just go, drive all night. By the way, we were like sleeping in the van, sleeping in Red Roof Inns, eating Waffle House. Not a lot of money left, like fistfuls of cash and maybe like credit card had that much left. And there's very little left in the tank in the company. We're maybe down to a week or two of cash. We drive all night, get to Sycamore. This is like one of the divine intervention moments of how MAKO happened. I show up unshaven, disheveled, sleeping in the same clothes for a long time now. I don't know how many weeks we're on the road. So I go in and John's there. He says hello. And I give the worst presentation and pitch of my life. I'm tired. I had not been sleeping for days. We're driving all over the country. And halfway through, John Whitman just stops it. He goes, this is a disaster. Just get out of here. And I think he yelled at Chris, like, you wasted my time. And I thought that was it. We were done. I was like, hope against hope. I'm going to go for it. Nothing's going to stop us. But that felt really bad. That felt like our last chance. Last strikeout, game's over, the rain starting, umps making people leave the field. We pack up and we're heading to the van. And I remember going near the van and like Whitman comes out and he's like, hang on, I'm going to give you guys a do-over. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm going to give you, you guys need to get a hotel, get some clothes, shave, have a dinner. You look like you haven't slept or eaten. And I said, no, we haven't slept or eaten for weeks. We're just driving around, you know, against all odds, hoping to get funded. Team is back home working for months now with no funding. We're just going to keep this thing alive. He's like, come back tomorrow. I came back in the morning, rested. I think I got some new clothes somewhere, had a good dinner somewhere. He put us up in a nice hotel, hit a home run, and Whitman funded us. And not long after that, I find myself in the governor's mansion. I was sleeping, you know, imagine sleeping in a van in a Red Roof Inn. And then like not long after, you're in the governor's mansion. Christy Whitman's asking me, do I want fresh squeezed orange juice with my eggs? So this is like what it means to be a founder. The dichotomy between being at the end, the sharks are going to eat you. There's no more wood. There's no ships. There's nothing. It's over. And then this like miraculous thing happened. And that was just incredible. And I was forever grateful to John and Chris for making that happen. That was like, I think, one of the essential existential turning points of why MAKO surgery existed. That still exists today.
Amazing. That is, and of course, like, has helped millions of patients, had a remarkable story. And I would even say also, it was kind of like, is swan song the right? No, swan song's maybe not the right way to put it, but it was maybe redemption for Kevin Lobo, because Kevin Lobo, when he was at J&J, was like, did everything in his power to convince J&J back in the 2000s to buy Intuitive, and J&J did not listen to him. He goes on to Stryker, and, you know, when I interviewed Maurice was telling me, he's like, yeah, like when Kevin was going to buy us, he said, look, like, I might, you know, this may or may not work. We'll see what happens. I may get fired for this, but I'm not going to let this go. Like, we're not going to lose this deal. And he made it happen. And, you know, it was a tough acquisition. I think the merger was very, very difficult, but Stryker made it happen. You know,
Kevin was great and bold, and I think it pays to be a great, bold CEO. And he's been kicking his competitors' butts, and I love how they've scaled what we built. I got to tell you a real moment of like another thing trying to shut down this robot.
Yes.
So
let's hear it.
Early on, there's Arthur, there's Dennis, and there's a brilliant system engineer named Josig. And my board wants me to shut down the robot program. Think about this. The robot that is MAKO Surgical, that is the enabler for Stryker. The investors, in their wisdom, wanted me to shut it down. And when they came by, I would hide them. I would hide the robot guys from the investors in a closet in our shabby little thing. This is early days of like Zcad becoming MAKO. until one day the team had enabled a couple breakthroughs. One of the biggest breakthroughs was accurate sculpting and doing it on moving objects. People don't realize like the MAKO robot can cut high accuracy on moving bone, which was deemed impossible. First, it was deemed like this thing can't be accurate because it's not gear-based. Secondly, it can never do that on moving bone. Everyone else was like holding the leg in place. And we understood from surgeons that it needed to be dynamic because they needed to feel muscle tension. Those were two impossible things that were not happening. And I had like highly underfunded, underpaid guys who were brilliant roboticists. Nobody wanted to fund robotics at the time, hiding in my closets at the early MAKO facility. So think about this scene. So I'm hiding them in the back room when investors come by. They're like, did you fire those robot guys? Oh, they're not here. And then they come back like in a year or something, and the guys are there, and like they're screaming at me. Investors and board members are screaming at me. Why do you have this here? And I'm just, they're going to fire you and all that. I'm like, just watch what these guys do. And they showed for the first time the MAKO sculpting a perfect pocket for an implant on moving. It was cadaver bone, sawbones. And they're like, how did that happen? I'm like, these three guys did that. So the essential thing that MAKO does was created by like 4 or 5 people. There was like Arthur, Hyosig Dennis, and there was Lou, who was our chief software architect. It was just a handful of people, like less than 10 people, made the essential thing happen. And then all the other engineers, like they helped codify it and break it through. But the real inventive, amazing, oh my God moments, those nonlinear change the world moments, were just a handful of people under great duress, highly underpaid, underwhelmed. And like that was like how you make a company like this. That was the part that if you ask Kevin, what's the selling thing on a MAKO? It's like the zero gravity feel, the accurate cut on moving bone. It's just like, how did that happen? Those are the guys that hid in my closet that in their wisdom, the investors wanted me to fire. So that's what it takes to make a company like this.
All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a MedTech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day. And that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Katib & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. We figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high impact strategies, of course using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a no name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore, because you've already wasted plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now, and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I love that you share that, because I think a lot of people need to understand that raising money and making companies successful is incredibly difficult. I think it takes, like, I'm a startup guy. After I left medical school, I went into startups. So I literally don't know anything else, but you need like a really high threshold for pain and chaos, and like you need to be able to go, like, it's funny because like when people, I wonder if this would resonate with you, when people ask me, they're like, oh, like, what is it like to work in startups and this and that, and one of my things is like, you kind of have to be used to like going to bed with a bunch of fires going on and find a way to like get some rest and just, take it day by day.
It's like being in the trenches all the time and high levels of stress and really tough things happening all the time. Let me tell you, like, what I think is the most ethical and company building moment in MAKO. There's no MAKO if this moment doesn't happen. So we were supposed to do our first surgery. I think we did our first surgery June 2006. We had gotten FDA clearance. We had a miracle worker named William who had somehow, he was like Bilbo Baggins walking into the, the den of smog of the FDA, where they were like never going to clear a robot. And William quietly walked in as a kind of one-man team. And we had this brilliant strategy of like layering small little FDA clearances one on top of the other until we finally just tiptoed our way in and got cleared. And everyone else that was big and super well-funded trying to do this was not cleared. And I ended up at a lunch with a guy named Neil Ogden. He was the head of the FDA medical device panel. And he loved our idea of collaborative robots, people and robots working together. And he gave a talk about it at a conference, and they loved that we were building this thing that the FDA liked because it was human and robot partnership. And they loved that the liability wasn't going to be on the FDA. The surgeon was still in charge completely and working in a really unique, novel way with this robot. But here's the make or break. I'm a huge fan of Apollo, like, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Gene Kranz, who was like mission control. And he had this thing called tough and competent. It was a NASA credo after the Apollo 1 disaster. And I wondered, are we ever going to have that moment at MAKO? Because we were doing life and death things, like bring a robot into a surgery to work on someone's mom or dad or brother, sister, or kid is non-trivial. So I figured we needed Apollo level standards, and I made everyone write tough or competent on their desks. And I think it was December 2005. I think we did our first case June. We were supposed to do our first case December 2005. I think someone had publicized it, and I sat down with our team and I'm like, are we ready? All the QA docs are ready. The engineering verification reports look good. And I had this thing called the mom rule. And I got the whole engineering group together and I'm like, if you have a question at all, a funny feeling in your stomach, and you don't feel comfortable using this system on your mom, I will stop the case. Speak now. And a couple guys raised their hand, and then more raised their hand. And I said, what is it? And we had this system called Crisis. Crisis was a safety circuit running at thousands of times per second. I was looking at the behavior of the robot, making sure nothing could go wrong. No one had ever built anything like it before. It was like a first of running a real-time operating system at incredibly high speed. And they're like, we don't know if we've really tested this thing enough. So I'm like, how much more time do you need? About 6 months, 7 months. And then we had a board meeting a couple of days later. And I just like, guys, do you really believe we need that time? And they're like, mom rule. And they're like, I would not use it on my mom. We're not ready. Even though paper testing looks good, something doesn't feel right. So head of software, Lou, Dennis, Arthur, they're all like, yep, we agree. They all support each other. So I said, guys, I'm going to go into the board meeting and like, we're not doing the first case. So like, you're going to get fired. I'm like, that's okay. So I walk into the board meeting. I tell them we can't do the first case. There's like hell and fury going on and screaming. And basically they are going to fire me. And I tell them, if you fire me, the entire engineering team will leave because we're not going to break the mom rule. And that was sacrosanct at MAKO. And this is where it really became a not just lip service, but the real thing.
The mom rule.
The mom rule.
Mom rule.
MOM.
Got it.
Yeah. Would you, despite passing all tests, despite meeting all FDA and MDD standards, would you use this on your mom, assuming you like your mom, or dad or brother? It was a final ethical line.
It's a great question. It's a great heuristic, actually.
And a couple of the guys said, we're not ready. And I said, if they said we're not ready, we're not ready. You could fire me. We'll all walk out. We are not breaking the mom rule. I don't care what you guys say. I told the team I was going to stand in front of the train and get run over, but we were not going to let this happen. Just screaming and yelling and screaming and yelling. Finally, like Fred Moll, who was on our board, founder of Intuitive, good guy. He's an MD. He's like, I agree with him. Thank God for Fred, because he's like, he's right. If we do this right, it's going to set the tone for the rest of the history of the company, which it did. And if we do it wrong, it's over. One bad case, a couple bad cases, it's all over. You never hear of MAKO again, other than a disaster. And there's been other companies in our field, few bad cases, it's over for them. So Fred supported me, the board backed down, lots of threats. And I remember June 2006, I go into the operating room with Lou, our head of software. We had Yosig, Arthur, all of our senior guys. I'm like, you're going to be in the room. We're all going to do this mom roll thing together. And the woman who was someone's mom came in and she looked at us. She was still awake before they put her under. She's like, don't worry, boys. You look like good kids. It's gonna go well. I just distinctly remember her. Her knee is still going well. And Dr. Martin Roche was our first. He was the Chuck Yeager. He's amazing. Super cool, collected. He's like, it'll be great. And we had this whole plan that he was going to do a slightly bigger incision. And at case 5 or 6, we'll get smaller and smaller. By case 10, we get really small. He starts out case 1 with a tiny incision. I'm like, Dr. Roche, what are you doing? He's like, don't worry. And he just went in there, wasn't even looking. He's like, I trust the force. I'm like, oh my God, Dr. Roche. And it came out perfectly. He was like Luke Skywalker, using the force guided. He wasn't even looking at the screen. It was just like, he just followed the force feedback and it was a perfect case. And I remember the woman coming to talk to our team at some point. But here was the real breakthrough. So Lou Arata was our head of software, chief software architect. Not long after that, his mom needed 2 MAKO knees. She needed 2 knees and she was like in her 80s at the time or something. And I'm like, Louis, do you want to do a MAKO? He's like, absolutely, mom roll. And I'm like, this is your mom. This is the first MAKO team member mom we're going to do. He's like, 100% all in. I did not say okay on the mom roll if I was not ready to use it on my own mom. One of the early cases was his mom, 2 knees. She walked out, I think, a day later. And I think a few weeks after that came to talk to our whole company. Now think about this. This is the mom rule, a living and embodied philosophy. She came in, told the story. Lou told the story. He wrote almost all the lines of code, reviewed every line of code, said, I only said go because we were willing to wait 6 months and get it right. And that's why I use it on my mom. I'm all in on it. And that like changed the company ethic. Like at that point, it was like mom rule or nothing else. Like that really made the company what it is. And if you look today at like just almost perfect clinical history, millions of cases, it's those moments where we went back down from the ethics of surgery. That's what made MAKO great. And it's like those really hard moments that as a founder or technical lead, you can't back down from what you know is right. And I've seen people back down in other companies. And if anyone listens, don't back down. Do the right thing.
That's amazing. Like, I love hearing that. And, you know, maybe I have a bias, but this is why I think this is like such a great industry. Because like when you're in, you know, tech and you're not dealing with the FDA, you're not dealing with patient lives and everything. Like, yeah, you make tough decisions, but like these are real tough decisions. And I feel like, you know, compared to other areas of healthcare, what makes medtech so special is that like, if you look at biotech and pharma, like, it's pretty direct. The science has to work. It's pretty black and white. But in medtech, there's a little bit of art involved where there's like, you know, higher failure rates. You have to, you know, there's like more pioneering, if that makes sense. Like it feels kind of like when I think about like over time in history, when people come up with new innovations and they're trying to make it work. Like I feel like medtech, granted, there's like safety measures and everything, but it has that element of innovation still. You know,
it does. And like, I felt like we built almost everything in that robot. Like 100% of the parts we ended up designing, we wrote pretty much all the lines of code, like total end to end. We knew that system. But I felt like the thing I feel most good about MAKO, like people look at the economic success and all that. None of that happens if it wasn't for a handful of people with real conviction to do the right thing. And that was above and beyond FDA, above and beyond quality. It was like anti what the dollar people were saying. You know, people were yelling. It's like, something bad will happen if we don't do the surgery now. Like, but it didn't. I'm looking back in hindsight. The bad thing would have happened if we caved to their pressure. The good thing happened because we did the right things. We followed the right ethics. We built the system really, really well. And if you look back, 15 years later, whatever, it's doing really well because of that foundation. And imagine other companies like building robots, building medical devices, teams feel that pressure. Who's going to stand up and push back on the CFO and CEO? And that's where being a founder helps. Like you have that founder prerogative, I felt like I could stand up to anyone. Like you don't know the system, you don't know the team. And this is what it takes. Like, we built it from scratch, the entire idea end to end. And therefore we know what is the right thing. But even if that's not you, you're just in a company, you still should do the right thing. And I think that's not always the case in medtech, not always the case in tech. But for me, it really paid off in MAKO. Like, I look back and I see the success, and I could trace it to, if those things didn't happen, there is no, like, millions of cases. There is no like high success rate. There aren't all these patients we helped. And the confidence surgeons have are rooted back to like those ethics, which I think Stryker's picked up. Like, Stryker has a high sense of ethics and good standards and reliability and quality. And I think they've kind of taken what was there and like, let's not mess with it. Let's just, this thing works. Let's just keep propagating it on.
That's amazing. And, by the way, you're talking about like having like founder conviction and everything. One of your other founders was Dr. Maurice Ferré. And I'm wondering, like, when you look back at your time, what did that sort of partnership sort of teach you about not just collaboration, but also friction? Because those times are going to happen no matter what the company is, and what does it mean in terms of like building something that really outlives both of you? Because MAKO, you guys exited MAKO more than a decade now.
It was really interesting being paired up with Maurice, because he was like an older brother, more seasoned, but we're both pretty alphas. So two alphas that have to work together.
As a guy who's interviewed both of you, I can confirm that.
and I kind of I exploded after MAKO. Like, I had many other companies in my mind, so I was holding back a lot. But I think what made this work was I could sit in a room and argue with Maurice, and he could argue with me. And in the end, and there were a lot of like debates and friction argument, but he had this idea, which I use now at Synthbe, and I use that magically, called the talking stick. And Maurice's version of the talking stick was, we both had to hang on to this talking stick, look each other in the eye, and yell at each other while we're holding the stick, which is like kind of uncomfortable. You can't be on the other side of the room. You can't look. You have to look each other in the eye and go, "You're a blah blah blah." It's like, oh, and people will be like, "Oh my God, what is happening in there?" But
he never told me about this.
Oh yeah.
My God, is it an actual like stick? Like, where's the stick? is it in SciTech now? I'm gonna text him right after this.
This is the one I use at this is the talking stick I use at Synthbe.
Oh, so I like that.
It's supposed to have like
wait, that's not very long.
No, so one is give the stick to people, so when you hold the stick, you have the right to speak. Everyone else needs to stop. But Maurice introduced a more intense version of the talking stick, which
is both people have to hold on to it.
I hold and he holds, and
Rony,
you have to look each other in the eye and yell at each other. But in the end, he goes, you let it all out, and you're like, okay, are we still friends? Yes, let's go grab a noodle lunch together. We'd have this thing we call the noodle lunch, and I give him credit for that, because first he was driving me crazy. I was driving him crazy. But this idea of like, we're going to yell at each other and have this, like, it'll turn into a creative conflict, and we don't have to agree. And I think if you were working at the company, you heard noises coming out of his office or my office, you're like, what's going on? And it was like this interesting thing, because the way we divided things up is like, I'll build the product and tech, and we'll both deal with surgeons. We're both going to like figure out ways to unlock accounts. We're going to argue and debate strategy, but you're going to mostly deal with sales and commercial stuff. I'm going to mostly do product and tech. So we have these lanes, and we'll intersect when it comes to like winning big surgeons. So I think we were a really good team in winning big surgeons. We won amazing surgeons together at Hospital for Special Surgery and Cleveland Clinic, and we were both good at that together. And it was like this 1-2 punch. And Maurice was very good at like, managing upward, dealing with investors, dealing with the board. And I knew I wanted to start other companies. So I had dealt with investors earlier in the company. So I still wanted to be part of that, dealing with board meetings. It was a very, very interesting thing. And then when we went public, is even more crazy. When we were a public company, it was like, okay, like this 2 hands on the wheel is not going to work. The reality was we were both in the cockpit, and he's the older brother. He's pilot. I'm supposed to be co-pilot. And at some point, I think both our egos got out of control. I think Maurice will laugh about this. And the board said, you guys need to go away for 3 days and come back and work something out. So I remember we went to like Key Biscayne and spent 2 or 3 days like figuring stuff out. And he came on a Vespa, and we had fun and lunch. And we started talking about like the future and what we wanted to do. And I'm like, I'm going to start a whole bunch more companies. So he was open, and I give him a huge amount of credit for this, to officially become co-CEO. I was CTO, he was CEO, and it was just because I was acting like I'm a co-CEO. He's like, why don't we just do that? And I'm like, you know what, Maurice, I appreciate that a lot because it's kind of like acknowledging how we've worked in this way, but I'm going to do you one better. I'm actually going to leave in a couple of years and I'm going to go start a new company and you fly this thing the rest of the way home. I said, the product's there. We've solved it. You know, we've gone public. We've made all this stuff happen. And this was not going to be good. Like I realized as the company is growing, you can't have like two people. You can't have like a Larry and Sergey. And we weren't really a Larry and Sergey. Like I was like this hippie tech guy who had a very different vision of how to run companies. And Maurice had a different vision. Like the two of us had very different ideas of how companies are run. But for a period of time, we made that work together. And that allowed MAKO to be truly great. So I think we both look back and like, we actually had the best of each other working together for a certain number of years. And I feel like good about at the end, not fighting him for that last couple innings. And it wasn't that long. It's kind of like, you know, after I sort of announced that, the board's like, what are you going to do? And that's where I went to go start Magic Leap at night and slowly fade out of MAKO. And then thank God, it wasn't just after we went public, I thought I kind of accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. And then Stryker bought us not long after.
That's amazing. Do you feel like, okay, if not like a Larry and Sergey, because, you know, those are both two like technical co-founders, more, would you say more like a Jobs Wozniak?
No, because I'm too alpha too. You know what I mean? Like I think he thought I was like this techno nerd guy. He didn't realize I'm super alpha. And you know, like and I got to, you know, I'm now running my third tech startup. So we both wanted to just run things, and we're both kind of control freaks.
Let me ask you
and it
this.
was good, like, you know, I got to tell you, like being with Maurice was a good education in working with someone who is not the easiest to work with. Both, you know, how do you deal with a super alpha, and how do you resolve conflicts, and how do you know what you're good at and what he's good at? How do we figure out a way while we're together to leverage the best of each other? And I think we did find a way to do that. And that was kind of a very interesting moment of ego suppression on both sides.
I love that. And just a side note, I personally think that you and I need to go on a venture together and create a talking stick product. And we're talking about $1 billion opportunity here because there's the like corporate founder version of it. Yeah. And we can go into, let's say, the talking stick for spouses, talking stick for siblings. We can, and we go on Shark Tank, raise a bunch of money.
We'll have to cut Maurice in a little bit too.
100%.
I'm sure Maurice, if
he
you're listening,
have rights to the royalty on the patent for the talking stick.
He'll probably want to be chairman of the talking stick company.
There we go. So before we kind of depart the MAKO years, I want to talk to you a little bit about a Magic Leap and Synthbe. But, you know, when you look back at your time at MAKO, you know, that was a real like growing up period for you as a technical founder, as an engineer, as a leader. And you had a lot of intense moments. Of all of those times, and I always tell people to think about the first thing that comes to mind. What was the most painful lesson that you personally learned that changed you for the better?
There were a lot of painful lessons, but I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a painful moment. So it's 2008, and we went public February 14th, 2008. And we needed to go on the roadshow. Morgan Stanley was like, if you don't go, the world's going to collapse. And the economy collapsed in 2008. And we went public at the beginning of the collapse of the economy of 2008, February 4th. It was Valentine's Day, so I'll never forget it. But
I remember that too. I was in medical school and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
It's terrible. So the most painful thing was like what is supposed to be like the Super Bowl of a tech founder going public. It was going to be Maurice, Fritz, the CFO, myself, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley taking us public. You're flying around the world on this like Challenger G5. I asked my uncle, who's a pilot, he was an Air Force pilot, what jet we should get. And we told Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, it's a Challenger jet, which is not a Gulfstream. He's like, the Challenger's better. Don't go for the Gulfstream. I'm like, okay. Like, I didn't know anything about anything. It's like the banks asked us, what jet do we want? Because you're going to have like 8-10 meetings a day flying all over the place. So I'm like really excited about this. But in the background, my dad was very sick and he dies in the beginning of January, just a couple days after my birthday. And then we're going public a week after that. The roadshow starts a week later. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, first of all, it was just a complete devastating traumatic loss to my whole family. I'm like out of body, and the guys come visit and I don't know what to do. My mom's like, I said Shiva for 7 days for my dad. And my mom's like, you need to go. Like, your dad really wanted you to do this. He would love it. Don't sit around, just go. So I thought, well, I'm just going to stick my head in the sand and just like crawl into a hole and not talk to anyone for a year. Instead, 7 days after, I'm on an airplane and we're flying around the world in this whole other weird situation on our public roadshow, which went on for, 3+ weeks till it was like a week after. And then suddenly we're on the road going all over the country, flew to Europe. And I'm with Maurice, with Fritz, with the bankers from JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. And the world's ending too. So it's like my dad just died, the economy's collapsing, and I'm in what I'm supposed to be the target. Going public is the Super Bowl for a lot of founders. It's like supposed to be this happy, joyous moment. It's a miserable, awful moment for me. And then halfway through, the economy is actually starting to collapse intensely. The bankers call us and say they're pulling the plug in the middle of the IPO. And I remember, I think we were in Chicago. And it was very late at night, 1 or 2 in the morning, sitting on an airfield, and it's like snowing and bleak. And they're telling us they're going to pull the plug on us. And I remember sitting with Maurice and Fritz, and we were like, F no. There's no way we are like stopping halfway across the canyon, because if we do, it's over. The economy's collapsing. We'll run out of capital. That'll be the end of the company. So I think we ended up like screaming and fighting. No talking stick at this point with the banking teams. And I think they ended up getting up the heads of JP and Morgan Stanley at the time finally said, all right, we'll finish the roadshow. And we had a successful IPO, one of the few during that time. So it was a very tough moment as a person and as a founder to go through these multiple traumas at the same time. The economy collapsing, the plug being pulled, dealing with my father passing away, and then having this weird thing of like, we just had a successful IPO, everyone's cheering, and I'm kind of numb. So it's just one of those life lessons that sometimes the thing you are working for doesn't always coincide with what the universe has plans for you. But just getting through it, I'm happy. I won't say happy, but not quitting was kind of a thing to look back at. Like, I could have just dropped out and not gone. We could have stopped and pulled the plug because the economy was crashing. I think the endurance to keep going was that lesson. Like, things were really, really bleak and really hard, but not quitting was the thing I remember most. And somehow, I don't know where I got the energy or strength to keep through all that. But that was like a very important lesson. I don't know if that makes sense. But
No,
one of the toughest ones I've ever had to deal with.
It makes a lot of sense. Wow, it
was heavy. We need to go to more fun. It was heavy, but it was also like this thing where, you look forward to something. No worries.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Yard man.
No worries. But I think the interesting thing is like you look forward to something and you work to it so hard, and that's your goal, and like other things in your life. So you have to, what does it tell me? You have to remember your family and other priorities. What's really the most important thing you're doing? So like the mom rule. What's more important than what we're building as a company to make sure people's families are protected and their mom and dad? So these other things, these like non-technical elements keep floating to the surface. That was an important lesson.
I love it. And yeah, I think, especially in this day and age, there's a lot of talk about work-life balance, which I think to some extent is important, but in all reality, it's hard. I mean, unless you make a boatload of money, that doesn't exist. And I think for a lot of founders, for me as a small business owner, I'm a different type of founder, but I go through it myself where for the most part, you have a lot of work-life imbalance. Like there's some days and weeks and months that I'm a great father and husband, and there's other times where I'm not going to be around. And, I've come to that sort of realization and agreement with my wife, and we make it work. Would you agree with that? Like for most first-time founders, that they have to come to terms with like, it's going to be work-life imbalance for a while.
I think as long as you're trying to push the envelope and do something truly novel and great, work-life balance is not happening. What you can do is, first of all, you have to make sure your family is supportive and everything in your power on those non-work moments. When you have taper downs, you need to spend as much time as you can with them. Like I remember my daughter growing up a lot in ZCAT and MAKO, like running around the hallways as a little kid. Like we just took her to places. Like if you can do that, bring them, because that may be the times you get to spend with them. And you really have to go out of your way to find more times. And like, I think they sacrifice a lot. Like I think it is selfish to do these things, and you have to constantly check with your family that they're okay with it, and that there's going to be as many moments as possible that you can like retreat back. But I think it's illusionary. It's an illusion to think you're going to get work-life balance. Go work for someone else. Go work at a Google. Go do something else that can give you work-life balance. But building companies from scratch is not a work-life balance pathway at all.
I think if anything, it's just the thing that people, I believe, I wonder, what you think about this, is that the mistake of thinking that like you can separate the two, and you just can't. And I think that the people who do it best are just like, this is like one life, the family's coming on a journey. So like for me, when I do work, so I work from home, so that's one side of it. But also when I go to conferences, family sometimes comes with me. You make the most of it. I was talking to some other entrepreneurs the other day, and somebody made this comment. My good friend Jeremy Haynes is a really great marketer, but he was mentioning how some of the like massive entrepreneurs that he works with, they bring it all together. Like he'll be having a meeting with them, and they'll bring their kid along. They'll be doing, spending family time. So they're doing multiple things at once while doing business, versus saying like, oh, I'm going to separate these things. I think it's just not possible.
I agree. If you try to separate, you're never going to have the family part. So I would try to incorporate like road trips with the family when we go to conferences and events. I tried to bring them as much as possible to work dinners. Like now when I've got to go to a work thing for Synthbe, my wife will travel with me. We'll go to a city and she'll like find some cool things to do, and then we'll have dinner together and breakfast. So it's like, if that wasn't happening, you could be away a lot. It's like if you want to be an astronaut, it's ridiculous to say you're going to have work-life balance. Your family has to support that. Like NASA is going to occupy a lot of your life, and being in space is going to occupy a lot of your life. It also has to be worth it. I feel like for my daughter and my wife and family, they look back at what we did at MAKO and they're like, we've helped millions of people. They can point at something and say that actually did something good for the world, and that was worth it. And I think they could look at it and say, we actually sacrificed too, and we helped build it too. Like without their help, I couldn't do it. And I think Maurice would say the same thing about his family.
It makes sense. And what's interesting is that like, after, so MAKO got acquired by Stryker for $1.65 billion. Great money.
Can I tell you about that day?
Oh yeah, please. Oh, definitely.
We were one of the most shorted stocks on Wall Street. So if you know,
I remember that. Well, I kind of remember that because I was working at a surgical robotics company, and I was thinking about buying stock, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea. And Maurice obviously told me more about that, right?
We were the most shorted stock for a while, and it was like, why? And I didn't even understand what shorts were, so I grew to hate people that short. I thought it was like the idea that you make money because they are trashing your company downward felt like the dark side of the economy. So I was so happy when we got acquired. It was like close to $30, and we just destroyed the shorts on that day. If you look at it, went boom,
went from 12 to 30. Yes, I remember that day. It was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. And I remember looking at him like, I was telling Maurice I was gonna get a paycheck, get paid. I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy this stock. And then like I looked at him like, wait, why did it go so high? And they're like, oh, they got acquired. I was like, what does that mean?
It was such a weird, awesome day because first of all, like I think that's the day where like my in-laws were like, you're not a waste. I'm like. It's kind of like you actually built this thing, because I turned down some really good jobs like for J&J and other companies to go start this thing in the garage. And, my wife's grad school apartment for $300 a month. That's where we started it. And then to have that day where we went public and then we got acquired, it was like both experiences. That was like a really cool thing. We had the IPO experience and the M&A, but the shorts being decimated, I just dislike the idea of shorting because I don't think it's supporting building great companies. It's this weird anomaly of the stock market. I don't know. And the people who were with us, they did well. The people who supported us, they did well. People who were against us, it was a very good, like almost like divine outcome. And you almost go like, and here's divine intervention. Boop. It just had that look to it. There were so many moments of like minor and major miracles at Magic Leap that I do feel like we had the universe was with us. I don't know how else to say it. There was just like, I always had the feeling like there was the force with us. We overcame all these hurdles. I have no other explanation. There were some irrational things that happened, like the John Whitman do-over, and somehow getting through 9/11, getting through the crash of 2008, all of these things. And I look back and it's had a good outcome. And I think it's a great model of you can build a company with ethics and good purpose. I think MAKO was actually built with good intent and good purpose, and not all companies are built that way. And I feel that really matters. I don't know if you're a founder listening, what is your intent? Like, if the intent was make a lot of money, that's not a good intent. The intent at MAKO was, we're going to make surgery better for lots of people and do it as ethically as possible in a way that's like minimizing any kind of harm. Like Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics built into the architecture of the robot.
I love that. And, as we kind of round things out, and I feel like, we definitely have to have you back because, we need to cover like magic leaves and sympathy, but talking about like work-life imbalance, I have to do some imbalance toward my family and take my son to an appointment today.
Totally get it, Omar.
But I'm wondering, and by the way, I just have to share this with the listeners. So, because it was a pretty like amazing moment for me. But like he went on to make Magic Leap, which really pioneered like this whole concept of like augmented reality. But I remember this is the first I found it. This is the first video I saw of what Magic Leap was, and I remember how blown away I was. So for those listeners, it's if you're watching, watch on Spotify or YouTube. But this is essentially what I saw: a school auditorium in a gym with a humpback whale, I think, or blue whale jumping out of the court into water. It was the most insane thing I've ever seen.
I got to tell you the history of that video.
Okay.
I wanted to communicate the possibilities of spatial computing and augmented reality. We actually pioneered the use of the word spatial computing, so I thought it was more than AR or VR. It meant that the world volume and the sensors, everything that we were building would turn the volume of the world into a new kind of volumetric interactive computer. So augmented reality often meant just 2D text overlaid. So we wanted to go beyond that and go, what does it mean to like reshape the world completely, and to bring, actually I trademarked cinematic reality as well. So that idea of the whale was cinematic reality. So for the listeners, here's what happened with it. We worked with Lucasfilm and Industrial Lights and Magic. It was an amazing partnership. And they built a visual effect to show where we were going. So this was a concept video of where we were going. But what most people don't realize is that in 2018, we had an event at University of Miami for about a week. We took over the gym, the basketball gymnasium at the University of Miami campus, and brought thousands of kids and visitors by to see that live. So you saw the whale live at the University of Miami gym in 2018. So you'd stand in the back, you'd put on a Magic Leap system, and a full-scale like humpback whale would jump out of the floor and land, and we had these giant subsonic speakers, and we had these fans that would turn on that you'd feel like the impulse of the whale crashing, and it made you fall back. It was spectacular. Seeing the video is nothing, but if you were one of those, lucky few, I mean, thousands got to see it, but not millions. Millions saw the video.
So that reaction was real.
It was incredible. You see a whale come out from the gym floor, leap, and then crash, and then the waves would come at you. It was just unbelievable. And the team that did it was led by a guy named John Gaeta. So if you don't know who John Gaeta is, you can look him up. He won an Academy Award for the visual effects for The Matrix. He helped create Bullet Time, and he had worked at Industrial Lights Magic and came over and became part of Magic Leap. So he was part of the team that brought that video to life. And part of what we did at Magic Leap was put out conceptual things that we then made real. Every conceptual thing we had put out, we made then real and manifested at conferences or at game developers conferences and stuff like that. Yeah, Omar, we'll probably have to do a part 2 because Magic Leap and SynthBee could take like several hours.
I had a blast. And by the way, I have one last question for you with the remaining few minutes we have before I have to run out. But for those listeners who are interested, I do recommend go check out SynthBee's website. They're building a really interesting category called collaborative intelligence. So you can learn more at SynthBee. That's SYNTH as in synthesis, and B as in bumblebee, BEE.com. So synthbee.com. So Rony, again, thank you so much for coming on and like sharing your story. But my last question to you is that imagine that for the next year, I take out a billboard in every major city, and every founder wakes up to, let's say, an app notification on their phone with one message. what message do you put on that app and billboard that they're going to see every day for a full year, and why?
That's a great question. I'd say do what is right. And the reason I say that is tech is becoming more devoid of people who can blend humanity and ethics into what we're building. So I'd say when you wake up and go, do what is right, not only in your eyes, but in the eyes of like the world at large, think about your mom and your grandparents and people you really respect looking at you and going, did you do the right thing here? And I think a lot of folks in tech will probably say no. Some folks in tech will say yes. But, also think about the 5 or 6 year old version of yourself, the 10-year-old version of yourself, and go, did we like compromise a lot to do what we're doing, or did we hold the line and feel good about what we did? Like, did you have that Neil Armstrong moment of like stepping on the moon and like forever in his life, he's like, I did that. And I think if you can sleep well at night, this was, I think the founder of Infosys, like a clear conscience is a soft pillow. Try to do that, do what's right. Not only in your eyes, in the eyes of others. And it's like, the way I would think about it is like your mom, your dad, your grandparents, all these people that you respect looking at you go, did you really need to do those horrible things to those people? Is it okay to take their data and to make those teenage girls feel bad about themselves, like on social media? Did you contribute something? Whereas other people can say, absolutely, like, hey, I created penicillin. Like, I created the vaccine that ended COVID. I cured cancer. Like, do those things. That's what I think you should do when you wake up, if you can.
I love it. Couldn't think of a better way to end the episode. And again, we're having you back. I'll get on your schedule. Thank you for so much for coming on. And for the listeners, if you're listening to this, please do us a favor. This show has grown to be the #1 show in the world in medtech. Thanks to you, the listener. Forward this on to a founder and an entrepreneur so they can listen to this. And especially if there's somebody's in the orthopedic space, definitely send it on to them. I'm your host, Omar Khatib. Be sure to like, subscribe, give us those 5 stars, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Omar.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.